it's live or recording. I am very excited to be here with Hoby Hanna. Hoby, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us.
Yeah, no, I'm honored, Darryl. Thanks for asking me. So,
Well,
it's always great to be with you and the agents that you coach, and you've been a great part of our company's history and growth and being involved with us. So I appreciate you including me, and it'll be a fun morning here.
yeah, exactly. I'll tell you, for those people that might be under a rock, or you just got into real estate yesterday, I'm going to tell you who this company is from a business standpoint and a personal standpoint. And Hoby, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of these stats that your grandfather started the company back in the 50s. He was 18 years old when he first got licensed, which I can relate to. I was 19. And now the company, it's three generations, 15,000 agents and staff, and 13 states, 500 offices. And I think you guys did over 40 billion or something in 2022.
Yes.
Um, so gang, we have like one of the best, strongest companies in the United States. So that's why I'm very excited to have Hoby here. But Hoby, I'm gonna, if you allow me to indulge just for a minute to say something on a personal level.
Sure.
Um, in I think in all of our lives, we can see these moments, these next level moments because of that event. You're not the same person, or your business is not the same. It could be an event that happened to you, a decision that you made, or a person in your life. Well, for me, one of those moments in my long career was Howard Hanna. And I'll tell you this because I don't know if you know this part of our relationship. I had started the Power program back in '93, and a lot of my clients back then, at the very beginning, were people I had worked with before, whether it was through Sweat Hogs, Floyd Whitmore, or something else. And so the first company that I did not have a prior relationship with was your company. So in 1999, I flew to Pittsburgh. I sat down with Helen and I pitched this program. It's a year long, it's once a month, and give me your agents for the year. And she did. And your company was the first company that I didn't have that connection. So, she really took a risk on me. And I got to tell you that that program, that meeting with Helen, was one of those next level events in my life.
Yeah.
That you guys made such a huge difference, giving this no name guy a chance to make a difference with your agents. And I just want to tell you, this is very special to be with you today for
Yeah.
that reason. So
No.
thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. Yeah, my perspective of that whole thing, and you ran your Power Agent seminar for a bunch of years with us, and really took off, and it's great. But I do remember that, and you probably don't know this, but Helen, my aunt, who you're referencing, who was running our brokerage in '99 and was at that time president of the company, and then was CEO until she didn't step down, just let me slide into that role a few years as a family business. But Helen was adamant she would never let an outside speaker speak to our group. Helen's an educator and a trainer, and she was always like, so we would have all the different trainers through the '80s and '90s call. And the company was just beginning its growth. We were really at that time a Pittsburgh company. We had expanded from Pittsburgh, but we weren't in multiple states and cities.
Right.
And as the company was growing, some of us were like, maybe we just need a different voice who can connect to what our culture and philosophy is. Helen was against it, and she had everybody come in, and somehow you were the guy. She came away and she's like, "This Darryl, I know he's not one of the big names right now. I think she liked your New York energy, your theatrical approach, but you're also, I will say, the fundamentals that you taught in those programs, and I sat through the first that we had with Hannah, the Power Agent program. It was so tied to the core of what we do. It was tied to basics. It was tied to plan. It was tied to listings. It was tied to. It wasn't like we were taking a square peg and putting it in a round hole. It just fit our culture, and I know the agents that benefited and grew their business from that. So thank you for helping be part of our growth over the years. So
Well, I will say this too. I had to pull the numbers because you have no idea. I was so excited this for me to have this conversation with you. So I pulled the numbers, and if you take all the listings sold and buyer sales, combine those numbers, the 68 Hanna agents that we graduated before the program, they did 1,314, but a year later, they graduated doing
Yeah.
2,226. So they had an increase of 900 things, which is a 70% increase. So yeah, so that
Pretty
was a great
impressive.
program.
Yeah, it was. It was. So thank you.
Which, by the way, that brings me now to the questions that we're going to get into. So, everybody watching, thank you for letting me just be a little self-indulgent there. Thanks. So, let's talk about company culture because what I've always said about your company, Hobie, is you guys are like the Disney of real estate. And I'm going to give an example of why I've always felt that is when I was doing that first program that Helen took a risk on, we had three locations that we were doing a free seminar to sign the agents up. And and when I was standing on stage and I'm doing my thing, Helen is in the back and I'm 30 minutes into it and she's walking like now, if those people don't know, when Helen is not happy, you know she's not happy. So I could tell, and she started actually waving. I'm getting the hook. This has never happened to me before. And I'm like, what the heck did I just say? I had no idea what I just did. I get off, I take an early break. I think I was only speaking for 30 minutes. All right, again, we're going to take a break. And I go out in the hall, and you know what it was? I was saying to the group, listen, you guys have to take responsibility for your production in your life. It's nobody's fault. It's not the company's fault. You've got to look at yourself as your own business within a business. So you've got McDonald's and then you've got the individual stores. That's how you should look at this. Howard Hanna, and then there's your business. That's what ticked her off. She got me out in the hallway and she said, Darryl, you don't know our culture. The agents, we're in partnership with the agents. They're
Mhm.
our partners.
Yep.
They're not separate. Their successes are there. Anyway, so she schooled me. So I cleaned it up. But it was that moment that was clear to me that this is a company that knows who they are. They have a clear company culture and they're furious about it, they're strong about it. So that's my first question for you is that my first question, let me just, if if you were to describe it now, what is the company culture? What's the commitment that you have to the industry, to your agents, to the consumers?
Yeah. Well, I think, that culture is king in any organization. And I don't know I mean, I don't know that our culture is better than anybody else's culture in this industry. Like, I think that's a hard thing. Like, my culture is better. I think we know, you hit on it. We know our culture. It is a partnership. I mean, I would say we're a family business made up of family businesses. And those family businesses are our partners. So one of our agents, as an individual agent is out there doing their business, they're providing for their family. So we have to think in that aspect
Mm,
that, they hopefully our agents trust us to make good decisions. Hopefully they understand that there's a transparency to what we do. We care. They know our pillars and our foundation of what drives the company. They know our mission and they know our vision. In fact, we had a big company-wide meeting yesterday, just sort of reinforcing that as a reminder, so that everybody, even if they're new, it starts new with us, understands that we're here as a steward of a company. I'm a steward of this organization that is only as successful as the agents.
mhm.
And we believe that the agents are successful because of decisions, support, programs, education, whatever we bring to them. So it's a win-win. It's years ago, I remember people would say, well, are you an agent-centric company or are you a broker-centric company? And it didn't make sense to me. Why do you have to be one or the other? And I used to say, and I still say, we're a consumer-centric company because at the end of the day, the buyer and seller are happy with the experience they have with Howard Hanna. Then they're happy with our agent. They're happy with the management. They're happy with the decision, the marketing support, the training, the education that got that agent to be successful, the mortgage, the title, the insurance pieces to make the transaction easier. So that's what we try to focus on, and we try to drive that. And not everybody, like maybe not everybody's a fit to that culture. But I often say where the industry gets in trouble, and growing up in this industry, I remember at one point in time, I would say this, that I'd hear certain brokers almost have like a begrudge their agents. They
Mm,
got a higher commission split or they grew their business and sort of like a veiled contempt, I would call it. or I'd see somebody run a business that was just all for themselves. I never understood that because we grew up knowing that the agents were part of our family, they were part of our life, that we're in this together, that we have to make good partnership decisions, and hopefully we still maintain that as we grow and we grow throughout the organization. But the other thing I'll say is culture is you've got to be true to who you are.
Mm,
You can't be I find out, you can't like this industry likes to like follow whoever the new leader is. Oh, I'm going to
mm.
change everything to be like this company. I'm going to change my model. I'm going to change. You've got to be true to who you are, and I think that transparency, that truthfulness to who you are, I think agents want to partner in that level, and they want the support of that level, not the company that every day, week, or year is reacting to the competition and changing their culture and changing who they are. So that's hopefully that gives you some direction of why we think it is important.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, just to highlight what you said is that I was talking to a broker. The broker was upset about what something somebody else said, and they're worried about their agents leaving them because of that. And I've always thought you can't recruit an agent that isn't recruitable. And that usually comes from the broker if they don't have a clear structure or clear culture commitment of who they are in the matter of their business. And you were very clear. I loved what you just said is that you're a family business made up of family businesses.
Mhm.
And that's profound that what you do, you see that what Howard Hanna Real Estate Services does is not just listen to real estate, you're providing all of the agents, their family, an opportunity to have a life, as I say, worth smiling about. So, yeah, company culture is real important. All right, let me go to the CCP, which has been something that I'm just going to explain it real quick to people that may not be aware, because again, there might be some new agents or somebody. For those of you who don't know, actually, why don't you explain it instead of me talking? So
You
tell
sure
people.
you probably could explain it better.
Oh, come on.
Uh,
All right. So, real quick, the CCP gang is clear cooperation policy, NAR's policy. And when we get a listing and you start advertising it online or in the for sale sign, doesn't matter. It goes to the MLS within 24 hours, and it's a 6-year new policy, and there's a pro CCP camp and an anti CCP camp. The biggest one that's has become the poster child for the against the CCP is Compass Real Estate. But now, what's your position? What's Howard Hanna's position with the CCP?
um, if I had to be in a camp, I'd be in the anti-CCP camp.
Okay.
That does not mean, however, that I'm anti cooperation, sharing of data, and so forth within the real estate ecosystem. Um, we actually, as an organization, voted against in 2019 or 20 when CCP was put in place by NAR. We voted against it. There's only they had whatever NAR with their 500 members of their MLS committee. It was a sort of forced issue. People came in and said, "Oh, we got to do something about the data and the sharing, and that's what MLSs are for." And they passed this rule, and there were only about 12 to 15 members of that voted against it, which was kind of crazy. And it was like a 1 month before there was this dialogue. They go to a meeting and then it got passed. It should have been punted. It should have been discussed. It should have really who was driving the issue. Now, I say that because I started my career in 1993 selling real estate. And that seems like a long time ago, and it was, the Modalist book was still out, like for your newer agents or people who weren't around. It's like a telephone book that you, under penalty of death, couldn't share it with anybody.
Yeah,
And,
right. I remember those
and those,
books.
but I go back to MLSs, and I just give this not to talk history, but for people who don't understand, to have a little perspective. The multiple listing services, the MLSs, were set up between brokers as a B2B for exchange of data and information. And at that time, to actually exchange as well, exchange compensation. Okay, so before that, before the MLSs, brokers might have worked out one-to-one deals with each other. Darryl Davis, the broker, and Hoby Hanna, the broker, might have had an agreement. My agents can show your listings, you can show mine, and here's what we'll offer to cooperate. But so the business was a little Wild West and was fragmented. And what happened is everybody said, well, let's put this together and put this together as a database and a source. But as the broker in those days, you chose to bring to the table even before that, where you brought like copies of listings and you put them in a binder, you chose to bring to the table the listings you were ready to share into the market with the rest of the B2B. It wasn't like everything had to be in. You could, and then it moved to like, well, everybody should participate, so everything should be here by the MLSs. But the MLSs all had pretty good rules. I mean, I never, you knew some companies had off-market listings. You knew some companies chose to communicate with their seller that this was a private listing. You knew that they were going to put it in the MLS maybe a week after they listed it and try to sell it internally. That's part of the game. It was part of like, what do we as brokers really need to go do is sit at the kitchen table and convince that seller that I'm going to help you get your house sold and here's my strategy. And that was fine. I remember in Pittsburgh where I sold real estate, West Penn Modalist had a 72 hour. They got to a point where they said, you've got 72 hours to put it in the MLS, but those first 72 hours, you can get your marketing ready. You can call your clients. You could market it. You could sell it. You could show it. And if it's sold in 72 hours, it's sold before processing. It really wasn't a pocket listing. It wasn't a private listing that you had those sometimes that a seller would say, I don't want to be in the MLS. I don't want to be everywhere else. And I think the system worked well. I think what happened is, as we saw the advent of portals and we saw the advent of MLSs making money off data, and we saw some companies that decided to be creative with their product and say, we even had a product, we still have it, but we need to relaunch it. It's called Find It First, which was, hey, we're going to be in the MLS, but said to the consumer, find the Howard Hanna listings first at howardhanna.com. First was 72 hours, and then it was in the MLS, and then it got fed to everybody else. First was to try to get traffic to our site versus realtor.com or Zillow or somebody or Trulia or somebody else. It was just to get leads. It was to get business because that's our inventory. Shouldn't we be able to market and merchandise that? Maybe I'm wrong. But I thought that the system worked well. And there were always outliers that didn't work the system and maybe weren't disclosing what they were doing to the consumer. But they were so, in my opinion, at least the markets we were in, were so small. Well, then NAR comes and has their CCP. And just if you think about it, it was just bureaucracy. It was like, you have to do this. Why does a trade organization tell us what we have to do? Like, we're supposed to be innovative, creative businesses. I mean, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal today about the NCAA, another trade organization, how they screwed up their ability to have control. And now there won't be NCAA football 5 years from now. There will not be conferences. It'll be the top 25 teams. It'll be like a junior NFL. And they caused their NI. They made decisions without really thinking, like, let the free market react. Let innovative, creative brokers react. But I think they created this deal and they put parameters. Everybody has to have everything in 24 hours or agents are going to get fined. MLSs are nonprofit. Why are they fining an agent? And also, if you think about it, if you're a good agent, because if you're on this call, you're one of those best agents who's investing in Darryl's seminars, you go out and you go get a listing, which means you probably are a strong listing agent if you're taking Darryl's classes. You get a listing today at 3 o'clock. You mean to tell me that you're going to get all the photos, all the pictures, all the detail, and get everything in within 24 hours, or you're going to get fined $1,000? Like, the reality is you might not get your photographer there. You might not get everything there. And you may go back to your office and say, I just listed a great house on Brewster Road. There's nothing for sale right now. And another agent in the office might say, geez, Darryl, can I get in there this afternoon? My buyer's been looking. Can I get in? They're in from out of town. You let them in, and if the house is on the market for 500,000 and that buyer offers 500,000 and the seller says, yes, I'll take it. How are we hurting the seller? How are we hurting the buyer? Sure, seller could say, wait, don't take the offer. Let's put it in the MLS and see if I get a broader based offer. Well, okay, maybe you would. Maybe you would get a bidding battle, and that's up to that seller to choose. Or the seller might say, I'm done. I got my money. I trust the way you priced it. The seller might say, I don't want to have an open house. I don't want people traipsing through here. I got 3 little kids. It becomes the seller's choice to how that we don't force them to sell the house at that price. So why can't we do? So I think MLSs individually should have their own rules that they talk to the brokers and say, if you're going to participate and it's time for an open market listing, what's that look like? And not have a mandate from NAR saying these are the rules. Like, let people sit at the table and say, in our market, this is what we should be doing. This should be flexible. I don't think that MLSs should ever fine agents. They don't exist without our agents. But why do they fine agents? Because they want data to be more accurate so they can monetize and sell that data. Are they sharing that revenue back with? I mean, has anybody had their dues and their MLSs reduced in the last 10 years? I mean, the average agent pays $1,000 a year between board, MLS, and local state board. $1,000 a year, and look at how many agents in the industry don't even make $1,000.
Well, and I think it's really insulting when the MLSs say that an agent cannot put any kind of photo or advertisement of them, and they're the listing agent, but yet that MLS can put an ad for a home inspector or something like
Yeah,
that. How is that okay?
it's not. I mean, but unfortunately, what we're doing is trying to put the genie back in the bottle because unfortunately, and I'm guilty as a broker and being involved in this industry for a long time. We're focused on listing and selling houses, and we thought that we had an ally, which was an exchange, a B2B exchange between brokers that was fair. And what happened is we didn't pay attention to how valuable the data became. We didn't pay attention to like how big the MLSs were, making what they were making and what they were doing under the guise of protecting and being with us, but they became a B2C. Some of them have created their own websites. Some of them have created their own public
Mm,
facing websites to generate more traffic and we can't, I don't think the MLSs were set up to just level the playing field with everybody either. I mean, there's a lot of good companies that go out there and in my opinion, invest in their own programs and tools. And then an MLS says, well, we're offering this as well. And there's a place, and I don't think the MLSs should go away, but I think they should get away from. I was talking to one MLS executive who I think they're listening, and one MLS executive, I won't say we're in a big MLS, who told me they have their rules and regulations is 42 pages. Okay. Now, the reality is, though, there was a lawsuit in the industry that basically said we can't offer cooperation through the MLS anymore. So if the MLS isn't guided to offer cooperation and rules of cooperation, it's just a singular database to go find the information between brokers. Then maybe that's what it needs to get back to and have some rules, but 42 pages or 37 pages of rules, I don't think that's what it was ever implied to be. It could be one page of just like, here's the participation rules to be in this MLS. And if you don't want to be, you don't have to be. And I think that the challenge is we as brokers look and we look a little bit as brokers, and what gets to the point of there's so many rules and frustrations to our agents. Do we get to a point where brokers are building their own databases and sharing with each other?
mm.
You
Let me
know?
ask you, do you think that I mean, the way you said it was it's a little chilling too, that you've got the MLSs and they are telling agents how to run their business. And if they don't, or telling the homeowner, you have to give us your data. If you're going to list with a realtor, you have to give it to us. Do you think that that's a setup for another lawsuit for antitrust, for monopolization of real estate?
I, I'm not an attorney. After living through an antitrust case in the industry that I really feel was predicated by certain um, industry mandates, but I don't think I can tell you, most of us as brokers, we may like each other, but we're not getting a room. We're competitive. That's, but I worry about some of these things. I mean, that's why we took the stance as a company. It's one of the reasons we took the stance as a company to say to NAR, and we've had good dialogue with them with their new leadership. I mean, I'm not here to bash organized real estate. I just get frustrated. Uh,
Hmm.
but we've had good dialogue with NAR. We've had good dialogue with a lot of we're at 80 MLSs. We've had great dialogue with about 35, 40 MLS executives saying we think there's a place, but let's get out of the rules. Let's get out of the policing. Let's have simplicity of sharing information. But I do worry that like when somebody at a top says this is the rule for an entire industry, and then from there it comes down to everybody has to adopt it. It's like, okay, I don't. So we've made people aware we're not gonna abide by CCP. We don't think it's enforceable, and we're separating ourselves from that. And I think others are as well. Um, that's just
Have you
uh,
gotten,
I
has
just
any,
worry about I mean, we believe we're built differently as a company. We believe we want to do the best job we can for our consumers, our buyers, our sellers, our agents have complete transparency. We have creative, innovative marketing programs. We're a one-stop shopping company that we believe in offering mortgage, title, and insurance products to make it easier, make it creative, and be different. We believe we're built differently than some of the other companies, and we don't want to just follow in line.
Mm,
We just don't want to just be mandated. And we think all brokerages should be that way. We think there should be creativity that makes capitalism's a good thing.
right.
And creative businesses. And if another brand does a great job with something creative and it gives them market share jump and attraction of agents, then I should study that and say, hey, great innovation. Is it innovation that's trait like I can't repeat, or can I invest the dollars myself to grow my company? I don't think that organizations and boards they should play a role to advocate for housing. They should play a role to make sure that that there is some rule of law that's like fair housing is protected, and if there are agency state rules that they're protected and there's an advocacy. But I don't think they should be getting into, hey, we're going to limit somebody's creative idea on how they're going to market properties, and the seller is giving them the choice to do so, or the buyer is giving them a choice to work in that capacity. That we start doing that, then we're just leveling the playing field, and we should just all go just work for NAR, you know,
Right.
and not have creative, innovative companies. And I love seeing new companies pop up and come to the market and grow because there's something they're doing that's creative.
Right.
We've been around for 68 years. Getting ready to 68th year will be completed this year, and we're excited, and we've had longevity, and we've seen markets up and down, but we think we've done things to be creative, and we think that if that gets taken away, that doesn't make this as an interesting business. I don't think we're just a commodity that the government or at some level should say everybody has to practice this way.
Now,
There's good
now
rules and regulations, but not take away the marketing and innovation creativity, or I'm not as interested in being around the business then.
there's two things that the pro CCP folks say, and I'm interested to get your take on it. One is the reason why it was put into place is because it's better for the homeowner to have the listing on MLS, because if it's private, they're going to sell for less, they're going to lose money, etc. And the second thing that they say is that it helps prevent fair housing violations, which seems to be the go-to card that any people use just to justify a bad rule or policy. So, what's your take on those two arguments?
Oh, well, I'll take the second one,
Sure.
which is the fair housing. Yeah, I don't really like that argument, because that argument and sort of, I guess, says that a company like Howard Hanna must have a filter on its website for a consumer to find out what's for sale if they are a protected class.
Hmm.
I mean, that just like that doesn't very transparent. There's a for sale sign in the front yard. Here's our listings. Even if our private or exclusive listings were there, or we use our Find It First program and they're there before they're in everybody. But I don't know how that. I don't think we're saying that a protected class can't see this home. I just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a fear factor. I mean, I guess I know we have fair housing laws, and that's important, and we're very transparent, and we believe in fair housing, and as anybody should in this industry. But I sort of look. I mean, you can't discriminate in any environment, or shouldn't. But for example, if an airline chooses not to be on Expedia, but says, "Hey, you've got to come to my website to find my flights because I'm not going on a portal," are they discriminating against a protected class by making them not look at Expedia? I
Right.
mean, that's like the logic. Now, or even if you go to the point and say, hey, we're going to put all our listings into the MLS, but we don't want them syndicated. We're willing to have the B2B, but our seller has chosen that they don't want this house on realtor.com. They don't want this house on everybody's website, that they want some degree of privacy. And there are MLSs that do that. There are MLSs that do that
Okay.
really, really well, that have like, hey, we're sharing the B2B, but you can't put this on your website to market. You can't answer the questions. The seller chose and wants that. I think Chicago's MLS does that.
Okay.
Uh, that that then the agents all know about it. So if they turn around and pick up the phone and call their customer who's a protected class and say, "Here's a listing that you could an agent, a good agent could say, I'm not sure. I know that XYZ company doesn't have all their listings here. Does that agent sign up to get the feed for what those listings? And there is no offer of cooperation in the MLS anymore. So do they pick up the phone and call and say to the broker, "Hey, Darryl, can I show this listing? I've got a buyer." And Darryl might say, "Well, we're not offering cooperation." And under the new law, you're supposed to have your fee being paid for in that sense by the buyer. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is I do believe fair housing rules are applied to for sale by owners. I do believe fair housing rules apply to home builders and developers. I don't think there's just fair housing if you work with a realtor. I think the law of the land is fair housing. So the reality is, why do the builders not have to put everything in the MLS? Why does a for sale by owner not have to put everything into the MLS under a guise that says for sale by owner? If the MLS is the arbiter of fair housing, if Zillow, Realtor, and Homes.com are the arbiter of fair housing, if they're a public utility, then everybody should have to put that there, you know? But then again, you look at rules of MLSs, and we're not allowed to have for sale by owners on our website fed from an MLS. You can't commingle, but it's okay for Realtor.com, Zillow, Trulia, Homes.com. They can commingle. Like you got to play like there's almost somebody said to me the other day that the rules that are there, you're like playing prison rules. It's like, here's the rules. Well, how do you find your way around the rules?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like,
Yes. Yes.
okay, these are the rules. You better not break these rules. Well, if I did this instead, am I breaking the rule? Well, no, you're not. I can't punish you here in prison because you actually now I've got to change the rule.
Right.
So it's and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be complicated. We shouldn't be looking at ways around rules. We should have dialogue and say these rules were done 30 years ago. They're antiquated. Their technology's improved and changed, and how data is. And the last thing I'll say about MLS is, unless you have other questions, but if we don't, if we don't do that, AI is moving so quickly. We're going to get to a point where I'm not sure that MLSs are going to exist. Now, but your other question, that two-part question was, what about if somebody doesn't get as great a value, by not putting it in the MLS?
Right.
That argument could be different because there could be somebody out there that doesn't know about the house and it could go up in price. But I think it goes back to then transparency of seller and explaining the process to a seller.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining, and I do think most sellers, they end up listing with an agent, not with an MLS. They listen to the strategy the agent has and what the marketing is. In some cases, they may want to test the market and see what they can get. In some cases, a company may have significant market share and they may say, listen, you probably have we're fortunate in a market close to where I live to have a town called Chagrin Falls to have almost 60% market share.
Mm.
The seller in Chagrin Falls often will say, hey, I want to list with you, and yeah, go ahead and test the market in Chagrin Falls, because with that level of market share, you probably know who's already looking in the community, and can I sell it quickly before I have to put it on the open market? Or it's a little town where
Mm-hmm.
everybody doesn't want to know I have my house for sale. Can you get it sold before I have to hit there? So we
Mm-hmm.
may test that and strategize and share that that's part of our process, but then say, hey, now it's time to put in the MLS to see if there's somebody we're missing or exposed to a greater marketplace. And so as the seller has that choice, and if the seller chooses to take the offer, and I'm going back before CCP, we've always sold houses, bang, bang, that description I had before, where you come back and somebody else is in the office and they've got the buyer and the buyer comes in and you put the deal together. I've been part of that as an agent, a manager, an operator of a company, broker owner. I very rarely have had a seller come back to me and say they got their price and ever say to us, well, wait a minute, let's not take the price for 48 hours and see if we put it in the MLS and we get more. Now, maybe that could exist, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody will jump in and say, it happened to me once or twice, anecdotally, but I think a seller, they just want to get their house sold and what they believe is for the greatest amount of money. I'm sure that there's statistics that somebody says, oh no, it sells more when it's in the MLS, but how do you really know? Because if somebody's house for 700,000 and they accept an offer and it's a 30-day closing, because not just price, 30-day closing, no inspection, they're moving from Pittsburgh to Chicago, they've got a job, there's a trailing spouse, they're highly motivated. They've looked online and saw that 700 was probably the value of the house. They can look at all the statistics. It's just not us holding the data. They can find, you know, CMAs online from multiple sites and valuations online, and they know what the neighbor's house sold for, and you show them the comps, and they're like 700, I'm out of here, I can move. Maybe they're ecstatic and they just are done with, quickly on a quick sale. Well, when somebody says that could have sold for more, how do you know?
Mhm.
They also could have sat on the market for 6 months. It also could have, like, interest rates could have gone up the next day. Three other houses could have come for sale in the next 2 weeks, and now you're competing. And is your house better than the others? So it's not. We forget it's not an argument always on price. It's price, terms, condition, and seller motivation.
And
And
plus, some sellers, listen, let's just go to iBuyers for a second, and
yeah,
then we'll move
exactly.
off. We'll move off of this topic on some other questions. But there's some homeowners that they value their privacy, the quickness, the less stress over the money. That's why the iBuyer programs, I think they're flawed, but that's they exist, and they had a certain level of success because some
Well,
homeowners, if I were selling my, if I had my house in Pittsburgh and you were actively listing and selling Hoby, I would say, listen, Hoby, I don't want a whole bunch of Mama Maluks coming through my house. I don't want every age. I don't want I just want you, nobody else, sell my house. I understand I may take a hit on the price a little bit, but my peace of mind is more important than all these agents traipsing through here. And so that's why we should give the choice back to the homeowner, right?
yeah, we're in total agreement. And the iBuyer is a good example that there's always a segment of the population we don't. I mean, we train. What motivates a seller? Well, divorce, death, the estate, they're relocating, house is vacant already. Like, you can look at a house and say, there's 5 factors that add to somebody's motivation to sell the house. So, like you said, if you had a house and you were already moved to New York, and you had a house that was in Pittsburgh and you moved from it and it hadn't sold yet, and you rented it out for a year and now it's vacant. Well, you're already, in another market, relocated, you're sitting with a vacant house that you don't really want to rent again, you want the equity out of it. You might choose an iBuyer model. You might choose a model with somebody that says, I might leave some dollars on the table, but I want it sold in 30 days. I mean,
Right.
I'm talking to an attorney this morning who's representing a new construction project at Flawed. And he said to me, I don't want to say we're liquidating this project, but I want to say, you need to price this to move and give me a marketing strategy. I don't care if you auction the houses, because there's like, I don't care if it's an auction. I don't care if it's something creative. I don't care if you go to investors or you just think, let's reduce the price to sell them. Give me the choice. Let me get it done now. You know, so
And I'll tell you one last thing on this too, is the other piece of that is, and you and I both know this, and I think any experienced agent knows this, that sometimes when you have two cooks in the kitchen, a listing agent, selling agent, two different companies, that meal doesn't get produced as nicely or as smoothly as if there's one cook in the kitchen. Where, depending on what state you are, some states don't practice dual agency. But I used to say it on listing appointments that, I'll have the seller side and the buyer side so I can coordinate any upsets or I'll know immediately if there's a fire that needs to be put out before it kills the deal.
yeah, the last
Um,
thing I'll say is that, and we can
yeah.
move on, but it, I just at its core, I think that our industry should stop arguing. I think if we're really, our industry should stop the arguments that are like in LinkedIn and social media, because most people don't understand it. But what the industry must practice, and if there is a must, it's transparency and remembering we're brokering somebody else's asset.
Mm.
So it always should be the sellers and buyers' choice for who they choose to work with, what their marketing strategy is, what they want to look at is how, like, we can't force them to market a house in a certain strategy. We should give them seller choice. And there's a lot of sellers who will say, hey, I don't like your find it first program. I don't like a 3-step strategy. I don't want to expose it. Then that's fine. But we never should come in and say you must do something, because we don't own the houses. We're brokering somebody else's castle,
That's awesome. Now, you
but we
see,
should
I
have
got
a
it. I got
strategy
it.
around it.
I know we were going to go off it, but I now have to address what you just said about the choice part. See, now the pro CCP people will say, well, we just added a choice for a homeowner that they can delay the listing on the IDX feed. So there's the choice that
Yeah.
but what do you say to that? Because I have an opinion on that too.
Well, Yeah, I get that argument, but I'm trying to be diplomatic here.
I could tell.
Um, the seller lists their house when you give them the choice. The seller is probably going to list their house unless they're your aunt and uncle, because you gave them a marketing strategy, and they're listing the house. And when somebody says, "Well, the big brokers want to hide the listing and not be participatory in IDX," my argument is maybe because go back to why we have MLSs. It was a B2B. So when you have a model of a business that is nothing but to take a listing and then sell referral fees off of it, which call themselves a real estate company, you can
Mhm.
figure out whom I may be talking about, or a company that's a strictly buyer agency company that doesn't put listings back in the listing. So even if the seller is still offering cooperation, we're cooperating, we're doing the work, we're achieving the listing, and we don't have the chance to sell that company's listings because they don't put listings into the system. If a
Mhm.
true B2B, if you're like, well, I'm putting my product in, you're putting your product in, you have companies and you have agents that never, I mean, I hate to say it, but we have agents that never sold a house. We have
Mhm.
models that are just body shops, and you look at their per agent productivity, and it's really low, and they do a deal, and then, and it's not everybody, but then you do a deal, and it's with the listing agents doing double the work because
Mhm.
the buyer's agent is a novice, or they are a company that's not trained, or it's a company just holding licenses. Or if you have a challenge, who's the broker you call? You can't find, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with those models. Those are those models, but so that's my opinion. And my opinion is that they're also, now that we have buyer agency and we're getting contracts, we're listing buyers. Now I'm going to say what worries me is that agents aren't doing that. They're
All right,
signing the agreement.
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What's your
Like,
problem? And
okay,
hang
you
on one
got to
second.
sign the damn agreement.
I want to just say to all the attendees, listen, gang, if you want to ask Hoby any question, because we're coming to the end here, can you open up the Q&A? You'll see on the Zoom somewhere it says Q&A. Open that up and then write your question there, and we'll read your question for you. If there's no questions, we'll just keep talking. But so Hoby, let's talk about that, the buyer agency agreement. So how are you helping agent? What are you saying to your team about it? How to do it? What are you seeing the pitfalls and et cetera? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, okay, so we if we start with um, in the settlement of the Gibson or Umpa or all these cases, the settlements that have taken place between brokerage firms, between NAR, have basically been very specific that what's changed is that we don't offer cooperation, and that buyers agents must list the buyer. They have to disclose at the earliest point of contact, not when you write the agreement that I'm going to take you out and here's what I'm going to pay as a buyer's. So you're going to pay me potentially as your buyer's agent. I think it's one. I mean, honestly, it was like heartburn. We did a lot of training. We had a lot of agents that like, how am I going to do this? I've never asked the buyer because I was just getting through cooperation. Now I have to write a contract, but the industry has no qualms listing a seller, but I love the buyer agency concept because we're now being very transparent. We're saying to a buyer, if the seller won't pay me, you have to pay me X because I don't work for free. I
Mm-hmm.
actually am worth my value and my time. And it's more than just because I'm showing you houses like a tour guide. I'm actually bringing value, and I'm education and support and negotiation. And here's what I get. And you can have the dialogue that there's a potential that the seller may offer cooperation and I'll get it there, or we can take this and negotiate into the price. And so we're being very transparent and we're disclosing to everybody what the level of service is. What worries me, and I see it in our own company, no matter how much training we've done. And I talked to an agent that's at another company and that I really respect, who's a friend, who's like, no, I don't get that thing signed. I'm like, you have to, like, your company agreed to a settlement that said and paid millions and millions of dollars that says that we're going to operate this way. That this is the new law of the land, and then states approved it, and here's where it is. And we have agents that, whether you're afraid to ask for the order, you shouldn't be. You're worth every dime you get, and you should put it out there that I'm worth it.
Yes.
And yes, we can negotiate it. Commercial brokers do it all the time. And we have to change our mindset. But what really worries me is that agents aren't getting it signed. And here's what's going to happen. No agent in the country that I know of has had to pay to a fee to these plaintiffs. Your brokers have. Or if you're at a smaller broker, NAR paid big fees. You can count all the money. If we don't start understanding that we should offer cooperation, that we should get that agreement signed, and you don't get that signed, I just say I think the next tranche is that these plaintiffs' attorneys are going to come after the agents because we as brokers are like, we've done the training, we've put it in our contracts, we've done everything, the state's there. Hey, agents, you got to follow the law of the land. Or what happens if these plaintiffs' attorneys start coming after the top agents in the country?
Mm,
And I don't want that to happen because, like I said, we're family business with family business. Like we've done what we can to protect your family business through this
hmm.
case. Howard Hanna has, and your brokers have, or or NAR has, or whomever. But we have as a company, we've had to be part of that. So please, and I'm talking to everybody in the industry, whether you work for Howard Hanna or not, because most of the people on this call don't. Listen to what your broker's telling you, get the agreement signed, build your confidence level, and have that agreement there. It'll protect the industry and it makes the industry more professional. You know,
You made me think of a question that I want to ask you, and that is, is your company? I got a two-part question. Is your company encouraging the agents when they get a listing to ask for the full commission, the listing side and the selling agent side at the listing appointment? Are you asking for that or no?
no, we are negotiating our commission based upon here's what we're doing to market and advertise for you. And then saying, here's what we get, here's what we should get to list the house. And oh, by the way, here's what happened with the lawsuit, because people ask. And you can offer a portion of the commission. We can choose to offer that portion of the commission. You have to disclose it to the for the buyer's agent if we feel that's good. We didn't come out as a company, as a policy, and completely with the changes bifurcate the commission completely and say, listen, just pay us the listing side.
Okay.
However, more and more of our good listing agents and more we have dialogue with our management team, we're seeing things go that way because it's
Okay.
less confusing to the seller. Seller gets a little bit confused and says, okay, well, here I've negotiated a 5% commission. I don't want to offer cooperation. Well, am I still getting 5%? Is that the fair market value? Where should it be? So we're seeing more and more agents come in and say, here's what I'm going to charge you to list the house.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that somebody may try to negotiate it, but the buyers should get their own buyer agency agreement. Here's all the services I'm going to do to sell the house.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not offering cooperation. We're saying to the buyer's agent, there's no offer of cooperation. You've got an agreement, come in and figure out how you put the deal together or negotiate. And sometimes in the negotiation, the buyer will say, well, we're going to reduce the price to cover my buyer is asking me to reduce the price to cover my commission, or we want you to pay the commission. So we're seeing more and more of that. We have a standalone commercial company, separate brokerage. It's not Howard Hanna Real Estate. It's in 3 or 4 states separately. And it operates under its own broker license. We're competing with the CBREs and the JLLs and sort of that level of, and
Nice.
that's how they do business. The whole commercial world, there's really not an MLS. I'm not talking about the resi commercial. I'm talking about the big,
Mm-hmm.
big office buildings, retail, industrial. And some sellers will offer cooperation, some won't. They've done it for years. And there's no MLS, so there's no offer of cooperation. The brokers call each other and say, are you offering cooperation? Nope, not doing it. And so it's being negotiated in the deal. And when
Mm-hmm.
you sign up, like we work with Sheets, gas stations, convenience stores. We have an agreement with Sheets that if the seller's not paying, they'll pay us.
Okay.
Some way or other, here's our fee to represent you to go out and find land to help
Mm-hmm.
you identify the locations, and they're agreeing to pay us. And it might be that they're putting it into the price of the negotiation, lowering the price to cover that fee, but we're getting paid. One way or another, we have a binding contractual agreement that we're getting paid. We're not just working for free, looking for throwing, and I think too many agents are still doing that. They don't, we have to value ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And take the hard thing and say, well, if you're not willing to pay me and I can't get it from somebody else, why would I do this? I also think it helps us with the builders. I've been talking to a lot of builders who, they were having some good run here where they weren't offering us cooperation and commissions. And so what would we do? We wouldn't show the new construction product in town. And we might lose a buyer over it. Now you can feel much more confident to walk into the door of a builder or for sale by owner or something off market and say, yeah, I'll put the deal together because my buyer is willing to pay me, because that's what I should be doing. I should be advocating for that buyer, not just to show them what's in the MLS, show them
Mm-hmm.
everything. So
Well, I'll tell you and then I'm going to jump to some of these questions, remaining time. But what I've been telling our coaching members is that if the lawsuit with Catchmark was an antitrust violation, it was because we were having the homeowner commit to a specific selling fee to all competing companies, and they weren't given the opportunity to negotiate that. At least that was the argument that they won. Well, then I've been telling our coaching members, well, then the antitrust violation wasn't the MLS form. It was the listing agreement. The moment the homeowner committed to a specific fee on a form, and I'm amazed I'm still seeing local associations, even the state associations, that are putting out these MLS forms with that field on there. And I think that's going to be, again, another lawsuit. Okay, so let's go to these questions, Julie. So rock and roll.
We only have a few. Why do we need to belong to NAR? Says anonymous attendee.
well, okay, you don't need to be belong. The reality is that's one of the other things that sort of, as we look at the landscape of what's changed with the brokerage firms, that if you read settlement agreements and where the lawyers is, that was one of the other aspects that we as an industry would force you to belong to NAR. Okay. We never had that in our agreement. We never had that in our contract with our franchise companies. We never had anything that for a long time doesn't say you must, belong to NAR. And I think what's transpired is that the challenge is when somebody says, okay, you don't have to belong to NAR. Well, the challenge comes down to the three-legged stool that still exists. So, okay, most private MLSs, you can join the private MLS without belonging to NAR. Some MLSs have moved their bylaws recently and said, we're not going to mandate that you pay state and local dues to belong to our MLS. But there are still others that the MLS, the multiple listing services, are owned by the local boards, and then they mandate it up to NAR. And so they're like, you can't belong to the local board or the state board unless you also belong to NAR. So therefore, if you don't, you can't have access to the MLS. And here's the reality that, at least for now, as a data point, and I said there's a value of the MLSs. I think if I said to all of our agents, okay, you don't have to join NAR, and we've said you don't have to, but the minute they do in some of the markets, all of a sudden they can't have access to the MLS because the board is saying you have to belong to the board, and then you have to belong to the state, and you have to belong to NAR. Once that all comes into play, agents are like, well, I'll just pay the dues because I want the access. Now, so that's a challenge. Now, what I will say, I think there's good value at NAR. I think they are trying to get their house clean. I think the state and local boards do a lot of good and haven't had as many problems. I think NAR has had some poor leadership in the past, got too bloated and too big, didn't listen to its members, that ones that were operating businesses are selling a lot of houses. I mean, it's a shame that a lot of the top agents, at least that work for most companies that I know, that might even be on this call, they're not on committees at NAR, and they don't go to NAR, and they don't go to the meeting. It just seems like a bureaucracy. So although it has a good place, and I think that IKEA, I've had conversations with her, is trying to clean up internally and externally and listen to more voices and bring members to the table in a different way. But I think it's work to do. Also, I know there's these startups of these other organizations that are trying to be trade associations. I just think they're not hitting as well. NAR is powerful when it comes to advocating for home ownership, and I wish they were focusing more on just that affordability of housing and home ownership, and some creative ways for tax proposals for investors to sell their houses. I wish that was more the dialogue that we were having as an industry and collectively working as an industry with Congress and the Senate, more than arguing about CCP and how many rules are in an MLS and whether you should join. Because I think if our dues go to advocacy, it's a good thing. But it's when, again, my argument is, don't try to be a great advocacy group, but don't try to tell us how we have to run our businesses. So it's,
that was brilliant. Everything that you just said, every point, that was brilliant. All right, Jules, go ahead.
Helen asked, Hoby, have you ever sat on a pro standards at your local board of realtors?
I have in the past, when earlier in my career. It's been a long time. And Helen, that's I've sat on model list boards. I've sat on professional standards boards. I've sat on the big broker state forum boards. I don't right now. I'll be honest. I got very about 10 years ago got disengaged with the bureaucracy within those meetings, and we have a lot of boards. So it's like, okay, we were maybe making 80 MLSs, boards in every state, every market has a board, state boards. We've tried to participate as a company. We have other people that are there trying to advocate. But I just find sometimes that it's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of committees that are making decisions for another committee. And I'm a type of person that I like to, first of all, I speak my mind, but second of all, I like to get things done. It's like check it off the to-do list and let's move on. And as opposed to meetings upon meetings upon committees upon committees. But that's just me. I mean, that's my ADHD kicks in. So,
Get out of the room and get something going, right?
yeah.
Tricia says, shouldn't NAR FAR have eliminated all conversation in listing contracts regarding buyer broker compensation?
I guess this is speaking to what I just said about, I think the violation is on the listing agreement, and the negotiated MLS form taking the field off was just the settlement agreement, but the actual violation is the listing agreement. And yeah, Tricia, I think that all the associations should stop putting those on the forms. Yeah, that's it. Okay, next question.
I'll go one step further, Darryl.
Go ahead.
And this is maybe unpopular again yes, I agree with what you're saying, associations. I also think again, to separate what looks like antitrust, even if it's unintended, is that every company should create their own agreements. They shouldn't rely on a board to provide your agreements. And I've been in committee meetings where people get upset with that and say, well, that's not fair. Well, we do our own agreements. We don't use, we know what the state and the board agreements are, but we have our in-house counsel and our attorneys sort of creating and editing that they think is to protect us. Always have done that. Here's the tradition, the standards, the things you have to be aware of, but this is language that we believe is important. And we have different ones for each state that we're in. We don't have one, even though our attorneys would like to have one national, but they understand that local markets have traditions and customs that you need to have in the agreement. But I just think that when we have a board give out an agreement, because it's easier than a broker going out and paying a lawyer to actually give them advice and counsel and create their own, again, it's like a level of the playing field. I think that would protect us all, because then nobody can come back and say everybody used the same state or board or local agreement. You're independently running your business without collusion of another trade organization saying, here's the standard. So
absolutely. I mean, I've said it a million times. You've got this committee creating a listing agreement, and on that committee, you've got Remax, Howard Hanna, Douglas Elliman. You got all these competing companies creating the same form that they're all going to use in their businesses, and I think that is an antitrust attorney's dream to use that against us to show collusion. Okay, next question, Jules.
Patricia has asked many, many times. She wants to know if you two can work together again for Howard Hanna agents. She's a Howard Hanna agent, and she loves you.
Okay, I did not pay her to say that, Hoby, but maybe we should talk. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk, Tricia. We love Darryl. So,
all right.
Cute.
Go ahead.
Could the CCP be an antitrust violation? Why hasn't a broker pursued that, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's a violation.
I will just say yes, and leave it at that. I think that, I'll speak for this broker. I'm tired of fighting and lawsuits, and let's just go back and sell real estate and do what we do well. But I think the dialogue, if there's a fight, if there's an argument, I think the dialogue I think we're taking the stance of, you've heard, I don't believe it should be in place, but we're trying to take a stance to work within the industry, because, this is what I've done for my whole career. This is 68 years of a family doing it. There's really good in everything that's done, misguided decisions. And so our goal is to figure out how we work through and whether a lawsuit's needed. There's enough people suing each other in this industry right now. I just like to not have to worry about that. That's just fun. but somebody could. There could be an
I
argument.
agree. Well, and just for the record, I mean, Compass right now is suing the MLS and NAR about the CCP. So that's playing out. All right, last question, and then Hoby's got to go. We all got to go. Go ahead.
Trisha says, don't you think there's less transparency not knowing if there is a co-broke?
I'm guess that means that there's less transparency to a buyer's agent that um, they don't know there's offer of cooperation. Um, yeah, like I'll say this, Patricia, I I thought I don't think our system was broken. There's a lot of things in the lawsuit I can't like really reference or mention that, the arguments that could have been made or weren't made. I think our system worked. I don't think that there was collusion and everybody was putting in at a certain fee everywhere in every market. I think that oftentimes you'd offer cooperation and in the MLS and you might offer 3% or 2.5%, but you actually close the deal at 2 or less because there was a negotiation of commission.
Right.
Somebody paid for a refrigerator to get the deal closed or a home or something. But the courts saw what they saw, and they feel that that it should be divided, and we probably are going to see more of, like we said last year, we said as a company when we last August when we said these are the rules, it's going to be a couple of years to shake out what the real rules are. Other people could weigh in. Other people could say, well, okay, this was intended and you're not operating this way and we need a complete bifurcation of commissions, other things. So I think it's just ask good questions, share with everybody what you're willing to do, represent your sellers, and you know, and be transparent and honest. And that's what this industry should always be.
There's a couple of Howard Hanna questions that came in. Do you have to go, or can we squeeze those in?
Yeah, we can squeeze them in. We can
All
squeeze
right.
them.
Julie, go to the gang. You're starting to write your questions now at the last minute. You guys
And all
are
these Howard Hanna agents, you can call me 216-215-7567 or text me. I'm not hiding from anybody. There's no place you get to find me and Darryl, but you can reach out always as ever, any questions or anybody in the industry. It's we're open here and we want to make sure you feel comfortable, but we can
Yeah,
answer.
you Howard Hanna agents, you know how accessible the leadership is. I know that's one of their company culture things. So, but we'll ask it anyway. Hoby's being generous with his time. But just two more. That's it. The rest of you are starting to ask your questions now. I'm sorry, you should have done it earlier when I had asked you because we got to end this. But Julie, just ask Maria's and Renee's question.
Marla, okay.
Marla,
Marla,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
that's okay. Thoughts on Zillow banning a seller's listing if they order their agent to keep it off the internet immediately?
Oh, we could be here for a while, Marla. I don't think, I think it's going to be. Let me say this, and I precurse this because in case somebody from Zillow is listening or watches this, I like Zillow. I think they're part of our ecosystem. They're part of our. We at times I have like and they know this. I'll say this to their faces. So we have a love-hate relationship. Sometimes we love some of the innovation and things that they do to help our agents and help our industry. And then sometimes I think they get fickle and a little bit move a dial. I understand completely why they would want everything on Zillow. From a business model, all these arguments are, somebody could say, well, Hoby, you don't want it on Zillow because you want to have more buyers contact your Howard Hanna agents. Yeah. And they want it on there because they want more leads to come into Zillow to monetize because that's their business model. I don't begrudge that. I think it's hard when anybody comes out and says, we're going to ban a seller. And when I talked about those prison rules, guess what? There's ways you could find prison rules to take off-market listings, still protect yourself as a company, get around Zillow's rules, because they're not banning the seller, they're banning the company that listed with the seller or the agent. And they're sort of why come that I mean, and I've talked to them. I mean, there's a lot here. I think obviously they're embroiled in lawsuits themselves now between themselves and another brokerage firm. I think we're sitting back. We had a great call with folks from Zillow this week just to understand where they are. I don't think they should ban. I don't think they should ban listings. I think MLSs have to look at that if they're accepting an IDX feed. Am I allowed to ban people's listings? I guess so. I guess I could say, well, I'm going to ban listings from another broker from my IDX feed, or like it's slippery slope. And I think we're talking about a small margin of properties that if a seller truly chooses, as we said before, to not want to be on Zillow right now, to not want to be in the MLS, to want to be in a private network or exclusive network for a period of time, that's a seller choice. And now we're getting into telling a seller what they can or can't do. I don't think anybody should tell us. I don't believe Howard Hanna, as good a company, I think I would never say to somebody, you can't do this. I'd make a decision saying, here's what we think's right for Howard Hanna. And but to say, I will never let you do something, or I'm going to prohibit you. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
And I do want to say, I think it's amusing. I think Zillow has lost its way, and they're not clear about what their commitment is or what their culture is. Because I just came back speaking at Inman in San Diego, and every corner I turned, Zillow had an ad that says Zillow works for agents. But meanwhile, they're throwing agents off of their platform because they're not adhering to this rule and blah, blah, blah. So there's a little bit of an oxymoron there. All right. One more. Go ahead, Jules.
All right, last one from Renee. If we don't know the buyer compensation, how does an appraiser know the true value?
I don't even quite understand that question.
The true value is the purchase price, no matter where the commission gets paid.
Right.
So if the buyer's paying buyer cooperation on the outside of the deal, it doesn't mean the house is more than that. If the house is a simple math, $100,000, and in there the seller's paying the buyer's 2.5% plus their own 2.5%, 5% commission, the house was all on the appraisal value was always $100,000, the purchase price. Didn't matter where the closing costs went and everything else. So Renee, if that's what you're sort of asking, you feel free to ever call me, but I don't think that commission comes into play at that. It's purchase price, and that's what the appraiser is looking at. Can they substantiate the purchase price? And the appraisers already assume commissions are being paid and closing costs. So,
all right. So before we close this, by power agents, and I know we have some people that are not my coaching clients on this call because we open it up to everybody. But usually what I like to do is, can you please in the chat just acknowledge and share your thoughts with Hoby? Was this valuable? Do you appreciate it? Hoby, I didn't pay Hoby to do this. I couldn't afford him if he billed me. So this was all gratis because of his commitment to the industry and wanting to give back and to help you guys. So it's only appropriate that you acknowledge him for the contribution that he's been for you today. And so if you'll share that. And it seems like, Hoby, you did a fine job according to what everybody's saying over here. So
appreciate that. It was great. You asked, so it was really insightful, great questions. I love talking about the industry. And so I hope I gave a little value, whatever it may be, to your power agents and the people on today. So thank you.
And Hoby, as an outsider looking in, I've seen the company's growth since I've been in the business. But man, when you stepped in, new set of eyes, and you really brought the company to an incredible next level that I don't think a lot of people would have thought could have happened. So you've just done a fabulous job with the family business.
I appreciate that. This company is a lot of wonderful people, not just our agents, leadership, management. I'm fortunate to be part of I really am. To be part of an incredible organization that makes my life easy. I can come up with creative ideas and crazy ideas, and the team supports them or tells me I'm nuts and put it back in the corner. We're not doing it. Here's where the focus should be. But if I didn't have the leadership, the agents, the management, that's what makes our company, truly wonderful. So, but thank you for saying that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, gang, there you go. So there's a lot of great stuff. We're going to take this recording and we'll post this so people can watch it again if you want to do that. The last thing I'll say before I end this for everybody, let's keep in mind that we don't just listen and sell real estate. What we actually do is help people get to their next level in life. And so what we all do as real estate professionals is we make a difference in people's lives. And the money we make is a gauge as to how many lives we've touched. So focus on that, and the money will follow. All right. God bless you, Hoby. Thanks again. Tell the family I said hello.
Thank you. And thanks for including me, and great being with you, Darryl. Great seeing you. You're always fantastic. Great having you in our industry.
Thank you, Hoby. Appreciate that. All right, gang. Take